Alright, guys, it has been around 28 years since James Bulger, who was a British toddler, was taken away by his mother. Warning, guys, once I tell the story to you guys, you may be shocked. You may have this nightmare as well, thinking, why am I really telling this story? Well, I'm not really going to show this picture to you guys like that because I know I'm not allowed to, and I don't want to scare all of you with pictures showing the murder. So eventually, guys, let's begin. James Patrick Bulger was born on the 16th of March, 1990. He was a 2-year-old boy from Kirbyshire, Mershire in England, who was abducted, tortured, and murdered by two 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables, on the 12th of February 1993. Now, just before Valentine's Day, this boy was actually kidnapped and taken away. So Thompson and Venables lured Burger away from the New Strand shopping centre in Merseyside, England, in Bootle. His mother had taken his eyes off of him momentarily, and his mutilated body was actually found on a railway line 2.5 meters, 4 km away in Walton, Liverpool, 2 days after his abduction. Thompson and Venables were actually charged on the 20th of February 1993 with abduction and murder, making them the youngest convicted murderers of the British history. They were sent to detention at the Jersey places and remained in custody until the parallel ban, which was established in 1968 in England and Wales, decision in June of 2001, had recommended their release on a long-time license, age 18. In 2010, Venables was sent to prison for breaching the items of his license and was released on parole again in 2013. In November of 2017, Venables was sent to prison again for possessing child abuse on his computer. The Bulger case is prompt widespread rumors about how to handle young offenders who are released from custody now. It's not really going to take that long for me to read, but if I really do read like a lot, it's definitely going to take more time as usual. So let's just do a short summary for now. So on the New Strand shopping center in Bootle, there's a closed-circuit television on the February 12th, 1993, just 2 days before Valentine's Day. Thompson and Venables were cautiously observing children. Now, what I was going to say is that kids definitely do stalk children, especially toddlers. It is not for the fact they want to do this. It's because, people, kidnapping people? Now, this is seriously wrong. Apparently selecting a target, the boys were actually skipping school. Now, playing truant and skipping school at the same time, but it's definitely illegal to skip school. When they did this one regularly, Thompson and Venables were caught with seen stealing various items including sweets, batteries, a throw doll, and a can of blue paint. The boys later revealed they were going to abduct a child like that. So eventually, this one had lead him to the busy road of the shopping center, and they push him among the oncoming traffic. So what I was going to say is that these boys are actually shoplifting from a store. I mean, why would a kid below the age of 13 do that? Now, this is wrong. We don't ever shoplift at other stores. If people are caught shoplifting at any stores, they could get sent to jail, or they would just have to get them arrested. We don't actually kind of know why these boys want to do this, but they definitely do skip school to just abduct a child. There is no reason why you want to abduct a child, but it doesn't follow that way. It follows you just trying to abduct a child and murder a child. It's not good. The same afternoon, Bulger, who was nearby Kirbyshire, with his mother Denise, to the New Strand shopping center. While inside the AR butcher shop, at around 3:40, Denise, who had let go of James' hand, instead of paying off shopping, realized their son was missing. Thompson and Venables had approached James Bulger and took them by the hand and led him out of the shopping center. So, the CCTV caught both of the boys kidnapping Bulger at around 3:42 p.m. Thompson and Venables took Bulger to Leeds and Liverpool Canal, just a mile from the New Strand shopping center. When they dropped him on his head, he suffered injuries to his face. The boys joked about pushing Bulger into the canal. I can't believe why these boys would do these kind of things, but this is seriously out of control. I mean, these boys would have just stopped abducting him, stop abducting him. Now, what I'll just say is, this is definitely one of the gruesome murders I've ever seen in my life, especially when you want to kidnap a child. Now, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is seriously wrong. You can't kidnap a child. You can't try to kill a child. It is not good. And what should the mom do next time? When she apparently pays for things, she shouldn't have stayed close to James instead of just wandering off. Many children are kidnapped in shopping malls, parks, or even swimming pools because kids, teens, or adults try to abduct a child while giving them candy. This is not good behavior. This is really unacceptable because people are kidnapped. Why would they just kidnap them, So eventually, when he saw Bulger at the canal, the boy was crying his eyes out. Eventually, at one point, they just took Bulger to the pet shop and they were ejected. So eventually, what I was really going to say is that when the boys apparently did throw this blue Hammerdown monoplane into Bulger's left eye, they kicked him, they stamped him, they threw picks and stones on him, and they placed batteries on Bulger's mouth. And according to police, some may say they inserted right here. Not gonna mention that one. Although none was found here, finally the boys dropped a 10-kilogram railway fish plate on Bulger. He sustained 10 skull fractures into the bar, striking his head. And Bulger suffered so many injuries, 42 in total. It was fatal. Unfortunately, what I was really going to say is that Thompson and Venables had laid Bulger across the railway tracks and weighed his head down with rubble in hopes that the train would have hit him and his death would be ruled as an accident. As they left the scene, his body was cut in half by a train, and Bulger's severe body was discovered by some schoolboys 2 days later. A forensic pathologist testified that he died before he was struck by a train. Now, this is actually what I would say. This is murder. This is murder, guys. Please, don't try to do this with a child. You can apparently get yourself arrested. Now, but the cause of death for James Bulger's murder was actually murder by beating by two boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson. Now, what I was just saying, these two boys apparently could have just stopped shoplifting instead of kidnapping kids and just do something on the internet by trying to post child abuse pictures. Now, this is not acceptable. This is really considered one of the worst things people would ever done to kids, especially teens. So, now what I was going to say is, so a person wants to kidnap a person and just kill them on the train. Now that is brutal. That one is the worst thing people would ever do, especially to a child. Not to anyone, but to everyone. Now what I was really going to say is that I was really glad that these boys were arrested for what they have done. So, the legal proceedings, the fact that these suspects came to a shop for an interference, the Detective Superintendent Albert Kirby of Merseyside Police actually saw the two youths being with Bulger. It was suggested that the killers were teenagers, but the boys were actually below the age of 18. So what would I apparently say is that these boys were both 10 years old when they murdered James Bulger. Now, apparently this case really does happen a lot to children, especially with the murder of a 5-year-old Swedish girl. She was actually dead by these two kids. Now, this is the similar fact that happened to James Bulger as well, but it wasn't in the mall. Instead, it was somewhere in Sweden. Now, apparently, what I was gonna say is that these two boys apparently did get sent to juvenile detention because they were under the age of 18. Since the boys were 10, apparently what I was gonna say is that during the aftermath of the arrest, throughout the social media accounts of the child, both of them were referred to Child A as Thompson and Child B as Venables. So, eventually, these boys were going to be detained indefinitely. So, eventually, this is like kind of a long thing, but after the trial, the boys were actually sent to detention for trying to murder someone. So, what I was going to say is that if James was alive today, if he was around 32 next year, if he was alive by then, if he was going to be alive, he wouldn't have just been with his mother, or other relatives. So eventually, what could his mother possibly do if she apparently saw James alive? Well, eventually, what I was really gonna say is that Denise, who is the mother of James, would have stayed close to the child instead of wandering. And what the mother did, well, she didn't watch the child. So always remember, guys, if you have a child, if you have a toddler, please don't get distracted. Always stay close to your child. Don't let your child go off in sight. And don't let the same fate happen to James Bulger, because I will know what will happen to kids when they go off alone. Say for instance that they go off alone at the age of 18 or 15, younger than that. This thing will really happen to you. To save a life, to save anyone who gets kidnapped, we suggest people who have their kids on board, do not leave your child behind. Leaving your child behind will actually mean that the kid will apparently talk to strangers, and the strangers will lure them with candy, and sometimes they will get kidnapped. Now, this is a similar thing that really happened. So, eventually, what I was going to say is that this also happened to Sajin Rigard, where she was eventually killed by two boys in the suburb of the Wilson here in Trondheim in Sweden. So Norway. So these boys were similar to John Venables and Robert Thompson, and these boys were actually 5 and 6 years old. So this is the same thing that happened to Suji. I'm so sorry if I can't pronounce this one correct. So eventually, it was claimed that they have beaten her, kicked her, stoned her, and stripped her naked, just leaving her in the snow to die of hypothermia. So eventually, it was known that the 5 and 6 year old was killed by rampant teenage boys, So eventually, this case was compared to the murder of James Bulger, would have taken place in the United Kingdom 20 months earlier. Well, what I was saying is that kids would murder other kids. Now, what were they thinking? Are they really going to think that they're going to murder someone? Now, this is severely wrong. You got it wrong, guys. Anyone, any kids, murder people, and and people would just laugh, to just say it's a joke. You think it's a joke? No. Murdering someone is not a joke. You want to let your kids murder a kid? this is not a joke, guys. People would just do this just because of the sake of fun, like John Venables and Robert Thompson murdering James Bulger. Now this is severely gotten out of their mind. They want to shoplift. They want to murder James Bulger for reasons, but why would they do that? Like, I can't believe these boys would do a thing like that just because they hate children. They want to stop toddlers. They want to stop children. Now this is wrong. Now not many kids do that, but when you see some kids like going into like a violent mode, like trying to kill someone, it is definitely true because people apparently do see their child. When they're watching violent movies, they think that killing is a funny joke, but it's not. It is not a funny joke to do. Killing a toddler like that, it is not funny. It is not a true joke. Especially when you just try and murder someone, like murder kids. You just try and murder Sidney Ruja and James Bulger. Well, I'll just say these kids are definitely under the age of 18 and they murder kids? This is like totally wrong, totally brutal. Like, why would a kid just murder someone? Like, why would they do that? Like, why would they be under 18? Well, because they have been developing a lot of fights, like a lot of school fights, which contains a lot of violence. When people do watch like movies like that, well, what I was gonna say is that yes, people do watch a lot of movies. They do watch a lot of things, like violent movies, violent things, and they murder people. But for this case, for the G regards case, this 5-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy actually did murder the 5-year-old girl. And I mean, why would they do that? Like, why would they do that? They couldn't have just gotten sent to juvenile detention. And kids couldn't have just stopped playing with guns. Now, this is the case that really happened to people. Not to say that people would get murdered a lot. Now, this is the similar story that actually happened to James Bulger and Sidney Ruja, Mary Bell. So actually what I was going to say is that eventually Mary Bell was apparently murdered by 2 preschool boys at Scotswood in England. The first killing actually did happen when she was 10 years old. So eventually what I was going to say is that yes, kids definitely have lost their minds to kill people. It's a very, very bad experience. Like, why would they do that? Kids are definitely are out of their mind. Using a gun, using weapons, using things. They even shoplift and kill people. Now, this is not an okay joke, guys. I'm not lying, actually. Now, this is the similar story that also happened to James Bulger, Sidney Ruja, and Mary Bell. Anna Kurgil. So actually, 2 boys were actually known as Boy A and Boy B, were 13 years old, and they eventually murdered the 14-year-old girl, Anna Kurgil, who was a Russian. So eventually, what I was going to say is that these kids are totally out of their mind murdering someone. I mean, what were they thinking? Like, what were they thinking? And also, for that, we also have another story. Kevin Haljamerson. So eventually the 4-year-old Kevin Haljamerson was found dead in Arvika after 2 brothers, 5 and 7 years old, were claimed and confused. They murdered him, actually. So what I was going to say is that, are kids really out of their mind murdering another kid? Like, if a kid was under the age of 18, would they still murder kids like that? Well, it does happen a lot around the world, especially in Europe. Eventually, there were lots of cases in the UK, Norway, and Finland, even Ireland as well. Now, what I was going to say is that people would just murder people, and unfortunately, what I was going to say is that This case is going to be very, very scary. It will shock you. Now, what I was going to say is that people have lost their minds murdering someone who's under the age of 18. They totally have lost their mind when murdering people. Does it mean they want to pulverize people and get paid? No, it doesn't mean that way. It never means that way. It follows you becoming the kid who is an innocent child killing a child under the age of 18. Now, what I was going to say is that children under the age of 18 definitely do murder kids who are younger than them. Now, this actually does happen a lot to people, but it's not for the fact when people do these kind of things, they just want to do it. Now, what I was going to say is that you can get sent to jail for murder, or you can get hanged. If it's a brutal murder, you can get sent for more than 5 years. If you do the same thing again, it's up to jail. For anyone who murders people under the age of 18 will actually get sent to juvenile detention, but won't be hanged. But if you're over the age of 18, yes, you'll get sent to jail, you'll get hanged, and guess what? No one's even going to accept the murderer like people. Like, they just murder like a 2-year-old toddler, like a 2-year-old toddler, a 14-year-old girl, a 5-year-old girl. Now, this is really serious, guys. We don't want anyone to murder kids. And I'm not lying. I'm not mean, guys. But this case is a very, very scary case. You guys don't want to watch. Especially if I show you the James Bulger video about what happened. No, this is definitely going to be very, very scary. We don't want anyone to watch this video under the age of 18. Now, this video is definitely going to be way worse. But what I was going to say is that, yes, I was about to say, like, parents, if you ever go out with your children, here is a reminder. Do not leave your children unattended. If they apparently see a stranger, if the stranger asks them for candy, it is best not to. We do not want anyone to get lured by strangers, and we don't want anyone to be murdered by them. Don't end the same fate as James Bulger did, or any other child who will get murdered at just a young age by kids. Kids are totally like out of their mind, murdering people, murdering toddlers. It's not just anyone, their parents as well. Like, are they crazy? Are they crazy? Do they want to murder people because they get expelled from school? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They just do that just because of the state they want to copy and imitate people for murder? Now, this is not true. I really don't like people trying to murder each other. But just to be safe, guys, please don't try to do these kind of things you see at home. We don't want anyone to get hurt. We don't want anyone to experience the same thing as kids do. Kids would definitely do murder kids, parents, or even teens. They would even murder their siblings as well. Now, I'll just say this is the scariest part I'm going to tell, but definitely this is true. It's because I want you guys to know, like, how much I don't like this kind of story, but even though if I'm still telling the story, I still can't show you that picture, and it's, like, totally fine, it's, like, totally fine. Now, what I was going to say is that maybe that's definitely, like, I don't know what to say about this, but definitely, there has been a lot of cases where children under the age of 18 had murdered people, especially kids or teens. So I want people to be very, very careful about this. But guys, that's all I have to say for now, and this is me, Waylon the Tomboy Gamer, signing off.